Welcome everyone to our LinkedIn Live event today, where we're going to be exploring AI in the insurance industry. We've got over 75 of you that registered today, so it's pretty clear to us that AI is a topic of interest. As the insurance landscape evolves, AI is, rapidly changing the way folks are underwriting, assessing risk, personalizing experiences, and streamlining operations. And in this session today, we'll hear from two industry experts to get their perspectives on the application of AI in insurance. And I'm sure, knowing these two, it'll be a lively discussion. I'm Reed Colson. I'm facilitating the conversation today. I lead the consulting practices at UDIG, where we support clients with custom software development, data and analytics, automation, and delivery of AI solutions. And prior to my current role, I was the Chief Data and Analytics Officer at Markel. Quick housekeeping, you're not able to actually ask questions through LinkedIn. We can let you or ask you to submit comments if you have questions. The comments will show up in our screen, and we will be answering those towards the end of the session today. So now let's meet our panelists. I'll begin with Rob, if you could introduce yourself, and then let's turn it over to Lloyd.
Sure, thanks, Reed. My name's Rob Reynolds. I lead data and analytics here at W.R. Berkley. Berkley's a large multinational insurer, P&C insurer. Been here for a while, been in insurance for a long time, and just happy to have an opportunity to talk about something as interesting as this. Lloyd, take it away.
All right, thank you, Rob. Good day, everybody. My name is Lloyd Schultz. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Markel. Markel is a Fortune 500 specialty commercial carrier based here in Richmond, Virginia, with global operations. We operate everywhere from Vancouver to Singapore, and recently opened 3 offices in Australia, which will speak to some of the complexities that we'll talk to when we start speaking about data and AI. I've been with Markel for about 8 years, spent my entire career in IT, most of that time as a data engineer. So I bring a more kind of technical bent to the conversation, and I'm looking forward to getting into some of the questions today. Back to you, Reed.
Yeah, on behalf of the audience here, thank you both for your time. I think they're going to be, very interested in what you have to say. I know you both have had long careers in and around this space and have a lot of experiences to share. So I'm really going to start with some general observations, right? Again, you guys have seen all sorts of hype cycles around things with respect to data. AI feels initially like it was going down the same path, but now it sort of feels a little different. It's in the news everywhere. It's, LLMs, decoding assistants, robots, self-driving cars. Their companies are making tremendous headway with AI. Others are beginning to experiment, and some are still at the starting gate. So I'd love to get your perspective on what is and isn't working with respect to AI and insurance. So my first question would be to each of you, where do you see insurance companies getting it right when it comes to using their data to develop or deploy AI solutions? Maybe we'll start with Lloyd, since I let Rob go first on the intros.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Reed. Way to put me on the spot first. Thank you. So when I think about, without getting on too much of a soapbox, when I think about AI, I actually think about kind of a 3-part kind of Venn diagram. It starts with your core data. There's the AI aspects of how you leverage that data, and then automation is also a big play. I think if you focus too myopically on one area without considering the others, you're going to be just that. You're going to be kind of nearsighted, and you're not going to get the full value of all the data that you have available to you. But from my perspective, when it comes to kind of how do we get it right, where do you start? This is going to sound like an age-old adage, but it really comes with thinking about the value that you derive that you can give back to the business in terms of whether it's generating revenue or reducing expense, and being very specific early about the use cases that you go after, and be really conscious not to try to boil the ocean. There's a lot of hype right now around generative AI specifically. Many of us have been using kind of AI, machine learning for many, many years. And just over the last couple of years, Gen AI has really sprung up. So I would say start small, focus on delivering specific business value. And then the last component is making sure you've got kind of business buy-in from all levels of the organization, whether from starting at the executives all the way down to the performer levels. If data and AI are seen as something that another group does, that IT does, or that centralized data team does, you're not going to get the full benefit and value or the support that you need to make it successful. So I touched on a number of things there, but start small, think about the value that you're adding, and make sure you've got kind of business buy-in. To me, those are really the critical elements that'll let you be successful kind of as you start to deploy new solutions.
Yeah, some great thoughts. Rob, what are your thoughts on, where you see insurance companies getting it right?
Yeah, I mean, I think, at least for my money, I still feel like insurance companies can have a lot of opportunity to just leverage the data that's available to them. Forget about AI for a second, right? Like there's still lots and lots and lots of opportunity out there to make better use of what we have kind of just laying around an organization. But where I think we get that right is when we start to realize, um, just how to do that, right? So there's I think AI is super interesting and it could be very, very powerful, but it also can be kind of a distraction. So I agree with everything Lloyd said. I would just add to the fact that's like, in order to try and figure out how best to have an impact, find where there's business value. Don't leverage just the technology. Find the data that you need, to augment that process and improve that process. Don't forget or don't, miss the forest for the trees or however you want to say it. But essentially, AI is just a piece of that puzzle. So I think if you continue to keep your eye on, the idea of being able to leverage the data that you've got available to you and your organization, and then you incorporate AI as an additional tool in support of that, the process and the data that's there. I think you'll see a compounding effect from those two things coming together. I don't think I don't think there's, we've completely tapped out the opportunity that data offers our organizations in this industry anyway, yet. And I think the other thing that I would say is AI, while a huge opportunity, I think it does have an opportunity also to be a bit of a distraction if we're not careful. So I think there is something to be said for trying to, again, craft what it is you're going after and go after it with, a real, kind of focus and desire to kind of get the results, and make sure that you're not kind of, just kind of running in 1,000 different directions all at once, because I do think there is some risk that this becomes a bit of a distraction. But generally, I think it's going to be hugely helpful.
Yeah, I think all really good advice. Maybe I'd ask, what do you see as some early wins in terms of use cases that you've either seen locally or seen from your peers?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just start us off, but I think, I think any instance where, clearly there's efficiency opportunities, right? Those are easy wins, right? So, I mean, we just were talking before we started, right, about any instance where you have a laborious task that you can make easier from the use of AI, sorting through files, where they haven't been categorized or they're not appropriately documented or they're not appropriately, tagged so that you can quickly reference them as part of a process or ancillary to a process. Those are all use cases that offer a ton of opportunity. And I think I think AI is going to be, or applying AI is going to be about solving specific, really specific problems within a process or a use case. So it's, I had someone come to me, it's like, hey, I want to use AI to just figure out how to, whether I should write this risk or something like that. I was talking to an underwriter about that, and that's like clearly not what the right use case. And he was kind of being flippant about it, but I was like, that is kind of the risk, right? But if you can figure out how to say, hey, I normally would page through this 100 page document to try and elicit out of it some piece of information or some insight into a risk or a claim or what have you. You can use AI to do that much more quickly. That's an enabler that I think is, can be applied to so many different facets of our business.
Yeah, I like what Rob said there. So one of the things that we've been saying internally is AI is just another tool in our tool belt. It's not necessarily going to solve all the problems. And we have to focus on the data, right? You'll get garbage in, garbage out. If you don't have good data, you won't get good outcomes. From a use case perspective, very similar to what Rob said, we've kind of been bifurcating it into two categories. And you'll hear folks in the industry talk about kind of horizontal versus vertical. The horizontal things are those operational efficiency gains. Hey, can I save each associate in the organization a couple hours a week? And that adds up over time. And there's meaningful kind of operational savings, there are operational efficiency gains that you can get if you deploy the tools appropriately for doing things, summarizing emails, summarizing meetings, helping draft content, things that each of us do in our day-to-day lives. You can gain time and efficiency there. So that's kind of the horizontal. We consider that a little bit of the low-hanging fruit. And if you think about the kind of crawl, walk, run mentality, that's definitely on the crawling side. Should be relatively easy to deploy, low barriers to entry, a little bit of organizational change management and training, and you can start to see benefits very rapidly. When you look at the more vertical use cases, that's where you go from kind of the walking into running, and then the industry specific ones that Rob and I deal with every day, things like intelligent document processing for submissions. How can I use AI as part of a bigger problem, which I think echoes something Rob said and what I said at the lead in. We look at data, we look at AI, we look at automation. How can you use that to solve parts of the problem when it may not be, purpose built or fit to solve the whole problem, but the combination of those things can. So I mentioned intelligent document processing. Can we scan submissions and look for criteria that matches our appetite? Can we look at reinsurance exclusions on reinsurance contracts and see if incoming new business might be immediately excluded or included within our appetite, things like that. And to me, those are the more kind of vertical, where often you have to create more custom-based solutions that leverage the data, the automation, and the AI, but ultimately will drive incremental business value, whether that's top line growth or expense reduction. And so within Markel, we're kind of trying to balance across both of those. Can we start with the crawling operational efficiency? Can we look at a series of use cases where we get similar solutions for multiple problems and implement more of those kind of vertical solutions that I mentioned?
Yeah, I like that a lot. I like the vertical to horizontal, and I like the getting experience and learning on the smaller or easier use cases, so you build skills as you go. You both alluded to this a little bit. The places where there are challenges or pitfalls or things that if companies are maybe not doing as well or not progressing. You talked about maybe not having good data, not having good use cases. Quickly, what do you guys see as the key challenges that are preventing insurance companies from really leveraging their data well and taking advantage of AI?
Yeah, I mean, again, this is one person's view. I think there are a lot of challenges, right? I think there's the challenges to change that exist for almost anything apply to data, just as they would to any kind of transformation or change that you'd see. And while I think AI is exciting, I think it's also at times could be threatening. And I think you see that in kind of the broader marketplace, not just insurance, just in terms of how corporations are trying to figure out how to apply it. So I think from my perspective, you've got incumbent processes, incumbent biases and beliefs and ways of doing things that are going to be upset, and that makes perfect sense, right? Like there's going to be resistance to that. Some of it valid as well. I think there's going to be a lot of questions out there that companies like, certainly in insurance where you're heavily regulated, there's going to be a lot of questions around, well, we could do this, but should we do that, right? And those kinds of questions are important to ask and make sure that you're applying the right kind of rigor to that decision for your organization to ensure that the outcome that you get is what you'd want for your organization, your partners, and your customers and shareholders. And that can be complicated with a new technology like this that is, I think, so powerful and could be profoundly kind of transformative. So I do think there's going to be some barriers along the way, and there's stuff to figure out that is not really dissimilar, but does apply probably, it might be more heavily applied to AI just because the nature of the change is so remarkable potentially. I don't know.
Yeah, I'll add on to that a little bit. I mean, there's a number of different dimensions here, right? Some of them are your traditional, it's going to sound like a repeat of what we talk about traditionally, which is data challenges, right? I've got legacy technology, I've got data silos. Any of those things that we've been grappling with in many cases for years apply in equal measure to the use of AI, right? What I said before, if you don't have good data, good access to data, it's going to be hard to drive incremental value from the use of AI and generative AI. But when you move beyond that, so data governance and data quality, very, very important, making sure you understand where your data comes from, how it's being used, how do you do data definitions. I kind of mentioned at the lead-in, I used Markel as an example, but Rob's company at Berkeley is very similar. We're in a very complex industry, right? We often, in Markel's case, we operate globally. We probably have 300 products that we sell across the globe, all very different. So when you start to think about things like, well, how do I use the data? How do I manage it? That data quality and data governance is critical to any success that you're going to drive. I would say above and beyond that, when we start thinking specifically about Gen AI, it's not just what could you do, it's what should you do, right? It's the responsible use of AI, it's the governance, the thinking about how it can benefit your customers as well as your employees and your shareholders, and make sure you're doing it in a responsive way. Again, there's a lot of hype here. There's some scare around the use of generative AI, especially when it comes to voice and video. But if we think about how we can use that in a productive way, the what not just what could we do, but what should we do, that's an important element as well. And then lastly, I think just the talent angle as well, right? This is definitely a new tool in the tool belt. It's a change in the paradigm for how we can interact with technology and data. And we have to really be thoughtful about how we bring our staff along and give them the skills they need to be successful kind of in this new arena.
Yeah, that's great. Those are some really good thoughts. I really kind of gravitated towards the data governance comment. I've been in a number of conversations now where I think, right or wrong, Gen AI is getting folks who don't normally think about data governance to realize its importance because they connect it to hallucination. So one of the things I've been talking to folks about is actually leveraging the desire to go after AI to really get an opportunity to get more investment and beef up your data governance programs. I'm going to shift gears a little bit and let's look ahead, right? So we talk to a lot of companies, both insurers and companies in other industries, and the AI is really very often top of mind, right? They are reading about it, they're hearing about it, they're seeing competitors do things with it. We often find companies looking for help in a number of areas, right? Like Lloyd, you kind of touched on this, like what's my AI policy? How could I use it? How should I use it? You guys both touched on like, hey, my data is not ready for it. How do I get my data ready? Companies are also at times struggling to find what's the right use case to start with. And then getting through that, how do I build and deploy? But if we look ahead and you think specifically about AI and insurance, how do you see, over the next 3 to 5 years, AI impacting insurance generally and maybe specifically in certain areas if you can?
You want to start with this one, Rob?
Sure, go for it.
Yeah, and it's probably true for any industry, right? AI is going to be pervasive. It's going to show up in many different ways, and it can be hard to predict how it's going to happen over the next 3 to 5 years. But I think we have some inclination of how things are evolving. And for fear of repeating myself, I think as we look at the way AI can play in that bigger tool chain of automation and the improved use of data, I think there's some kind of obvious use cases that are showing up that we're already starting to experiment with and actually roll out kind of full production solutions. It's the understanding, we work in a very complex industry. I mentioned hundreds of different products and so many different forms of submissions that we can take in when somebody's kind of applying for new insurance coverage. So using AI to help interrogate and summarize and create consistent views of documents and inputs is really critical, because that's one of the challenging parts of the process. Things like intelligent document processing, and then using that automation focus to then do appropriate routing to your appropriate, either downstream systems or users, underwriters or claims handlers, what have you. So I think there's definitely something around helping us understand and ingest documents more effectively. Another critical set of use cases that we've seen evolving is really around enhanced search and summarize, which generative AI is really good at. And there's a lot of tools and capabilities in the industry that can help us with that, where we need to pour over a series of legacy documents, or in many cases, a large number of documents, and ferret out information about what's the appropriate historical policy that may match a new submission that's come in. How do we summarize that information to make it more readily usable by the underwriters or by the claims handlers? So those things that we can do to gain efficiencies along the way. I mentioned before, matching our appetite, looking for exclusions, things like that are kind of, I think, clear early use cases that are building a lot of momentum.
Yeah, and rather than I agree with all of those. So rather than pile on, I think there's also an element of what we'll see in the marketplace that AI will create some dynamics that allow companies to be not only more efficient, but I think barriers to entry will potentially fall. And so I could see, large companies doing business or competing with smaller companies as maybe aggressively as maybe they did larger companies, right? So if I have now the use of AI and I've removed a competitive advantage from one of the market leaders or something like that in some niche or what have you, how does an organization that was built around AI compete differently than maybe organizations that haven't, right? In terms of any number of different dimensions, right? So I think there's that element that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I do think that speaks to, I think as an industry, we have to get more comfortable with the idea of being flexible and fast, personally. And so, so that first point is a reason to be more flexible and fast. Another tactical kind of reason to be flexible and fast, other than it's good to be flexible and fast, is I don't think the completely. So I think we are still figuring things out in that space. So we have to be able to be flexible in terms of how we how we pivot to one technology or another.
Yeah, I think those are great points. I think putting them together, right? I think AI is becoming a game changer for early adopters that can figure things out, right? So if you can take the search and summarize, use that for product development, use it to streamline your operations, it's going to create winners and losers. And those companies that can effectively move quickly, I think, are going to see share gains. So I do think it's an important place to invest and learn and grow in. So with that, maybe what I'll ask is maybe the last question for you guys, and then we'll see if we have anything from our audience. What's your advice? What do insurance need to be doing now to prepare for the changes that AI is going to bring? How are they going to be successful in this new environment?
Looks like Rob's thinking, so I'm happy to jump in. Robert, do you want to go?
No, go for it, man. It's good.
So I would say, and these are probably tried and true, right? AI is just another tool that's available to us. So you could probably apply kind of my thinking here across a number of dimensions. But I think, in general, you have to invest in talent, right? I think there's a talent war. We all recognize that. You have to invest in your people. You have to grow them, give them the skills and opportunities they need to be successful so they can feel that you're investing in them, but you're also investing, obviously, in the growth of the company and the ability to use these new tools effectively. I absolutely agree with something Rob said a minute ago. And it sounds like a little bit of a tagline, but I think we all have to kind of foster that culture of innovation and be willing to test and learn, move quickly. I think Rob maybe used the word agility. Not everything's going to work, and you don't have to bet the farm on every idea, right? You have to go try it out, see if it works, see if you can then, if it does, how can you multiply, how can you grow those things? So you have to have a culture of innovation. You have to invest in your talent. And honestly, just stay informed, right? This is a marketplace that's changing very, very quickly. New models are coming out every day. Every vendor is, infusing generative AI into the tools that they offer. So having that kind of market scan capability to understand what's already available to you with the tools that you have, what's coming that might enhance your experience or be able to deliver better business value. And the market will continue to change very, very rapidly. I think we're still in early days here. So having an eye on those changes will be very important.
Yeah, and I think as well, this is really early days, and that's why I was kind of giving this some thought, right? Is I don't know if we are completely appreciative yet of how AI is going to transform what we do or how we do it. So I think there's something to be said of it, like as we look into the future and as we kind of plan, is we have to almost acknowledge the fact that what we do today will not be what we're doing 2 years from now, would be my guess, right? Like, that may not be right, but I suspect that the pace of change in this space will continue to move so rapidly that so too will the evolution of thinking and application of the technology to what we do, right? I think the other piece is we have to be thoughtful. We run the risk of being myopically focused on the outcome that I'm trying to achieve, right? For my function, my area, my line of business, my department, my segment, whatever it is. And we have to think not only like, hey, this kind of goes back to what both Lloyd and I were talking about, is like, should we versus, can we? Yeah, we can do this thing. If we do that thing, it might be good for me. It might be good, kind of most immediately in my future. But what are the long-term effects of that, right? Like, what does that maybe mean to my business if I were to apply this kind of, this technology or this approach or this use case in a very wide sort of way? Not always are those two things completely in concert, right? So like if I make a solution that targets a certain problem that is kind of right in my front, right in front of me today, that solution may look different in the long term if you scale it across an organization, and it may have unintended consequences that I didn't anticipate if I just looked at it through my lens. So I think there's an element of, be mindful of what could be coming, be mindful of what's beyond your purview, and think about the implications of the solutions that you're trying to, implement in your organization, and and revisit it from time to time. Be thoughtful about actually forcing yourself to say, look, I thought this was a good idea yesterday. Today, I might feel somewhat differently. Just doing that check-in, either on an individualized basis or strategically as an organization, I think is important, and will become more so given the pace of change.
Yeah, that's great. I appreciate it, guys. We're coming up close to it here. I think maybe what I would summarize from what you both said, companies need to be ready with a few things to be successful, right? There needs to be a sound ethical policy for using AI. You need to have good data management practices in place, strong use cases, good executive support. You need to be flexible and experimental. Revisit your ideas to validate that you're still on the right track, and making sure that you're investing in talent. Selfishly, what I would add to that is that getting there doesn't have to be a solo journey, and there's lots of talented partners like UDIG that can help accelerate your progress. It looks like we do have a couple questions here. How do you guys think about the risks of an AI-mediated process as categorically different than a fully human process? Is there liability from a bad decision of AI treated differently than it is with a human?
I'll give you my 2 cents. I think it depends on how you phrase that. I think, errors are errors regardless of who makes them or how they're made. However, I would also say the scale of error is different on a human basis versus potentially an AI basis, right? So if you systematize, I don't know, that's probably not a word, but if you systematically make an error, right, and AI is making that error across a large base, like your scope of impact is much, much broader. So I would actually, I think that's the can versus should kind of consideration here. That's my 2 cents. I also think that specifically in the insurance industry, don't kid yourself for a second that there aren't people out there looking to capitalize on those errors and actively, waiting for that to occur. And that's just the nature of business, frankly, not just insurance. So those would be my thoughts around that topic anyway.
Gotcha. Cool. And maybe the next one's good for Lloyd. It's a little bit more technical. How do you see carriers handling external data requirements and ownership in order to build solid depth and breadth for AI use cases, including Gen AI? So really, it's kind of about that third-party data ownership and requirements.
Yeah, that is a very good question. So for us, I think, and we didn't mention it earlier in the conversation, but I think having access to external data, third-party data, and having the appropriate infrastructure to be able to support that is a critical piece of the journey that can help you augment your AI use cases. And I'll answer this question and kind of touch a little bit on what Rob said before. Everything that we're doing, and who knows how things evolve over the next 3 to 5 years, to Rob's prior point, but we consider everything human in the loop, right? We do not want to be turning AI loose on anything and allowing it to make decisions for itself. So we want to make sure that we're using all the tools, data, and capabilities that we have at our benefit to simplify and help the end user with whatever process they're already executing upon. So I don't know if I touched fully on the third-party data question, but we kind of think about that as just part of the bigger puzzle.
Gotcha. Maybe last question here that I've got from the audience is, how would you define where you are in your AI journeys? You're setting your vision, evaluating use cases, you're engineering, or you're just accelerating and operating responsibly?
Yeah, I mean, we're early still, right? So we're figuring out how to apply the various tools and technology to use cases, specific use cases, and the like. We want to enable our business. We want to ensure that it is human in the loop, as Lloyd said. I think that's the right way to start. And we're trying to make sure that we're doing so in a way that is, pretty conservative and pretty controlled, but also taking advantage of, the opportunity that it does present.
Yeah, relatively similar. I think that we've been at this for just over a year now, so we have made some headway here. I would say we are kind of between 2 and 3, but it really just depends on the specific use case. We've gathered a series of use cases and try to summarize those into different categories. We have been engineering for some time and building those things that we think are showing value, and then starting to look for opportunities to scale. It really just depends on the different aspects of the tooling or the use case. But to Rob's point, I think for all of us, whether it's the insurance industry or more broadly, this is still a new paradigm. We're still early days. Nobody's too far behind yet, and it's a good time to get involved, learn, and figure out how you can apply these solutions to help within your own personal context or that of your company.
Gotcha. Well, thanks so much. Again, I want to thank you guys for your time. We really appreciate you taking time out of your day to share your thoughts. I think it's been very insightful, and I've enjoyed the conversation. It's good seeing you guys again. We had, it looks like, over 125 people actually viewing the event, so quite a bit more than we actually even expected yesterday. And for folks who joined us, it's 179, I'm now being told, viewers. If anybody's interested in going deeper or learning more, you can feel free to reach out to me via LinkedIn, or you can hit our website at udig.com. And thanks again for your time, and Rob, Lloyd, really appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Take care, y'all.
Take care, everybody.